Hi, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here at the Ruttenberg Library. Come to you today with a bookshelf tour of sorts. As some of you know, I've talked about bookshelf space being limited at my home, and so I've found that I've had to box up a lot of books, and so this bookshelf tour is going to be maybe subtitled Unboxed, and so I'm going to go through some of the books that I have in boxes and share those with you. And I thought maybe that'd be a nice compliment to the bookshelf tours, even though I'm not sitting in front of a shelf. So without further ado, here we go. First book that I'd like to show you is Mary, Queen of Scots by Antonia Fraser. This is a biography on Mary, Queen of Scots. It was a very, very good biography. I haven't read a ton of books on them. There's Antonia Fraser, the author. She has written a lot of biographies on the kings and queens, especially the queens of that period of the monarchies. And this one I've read. I've got a book in the other room that I showed to you in one of my earlier videos that she wrote on Oliver Cromwell. And she's got several others that I would like to pick up and put in my collection. But this was a really good book on Mary, Queen of Scots. Here's one of those little kid biographies from the 40s, 50s time period. This is Frontier President, The Life of James K. Polk by Bill Severn. And so this book is the Ives Washburn Incorporated out of New York, so that's a publisher I've never heard of. And it is from 1965, so this one's a little bit more modern than some of them I've shown you. And by the way, I didn't mention the Mary, Queen of Scots paperback here. That is a Dell book, and it is from looks like 1974 was this printing. And sorry about not telling you that, forgot. All right, so the next book in the box is The Origins of American Politics by Bernard Bailyn. And if you know anything about American history, Bernard Bailyn is one of the, I call him the godfather of American history. This is a vintage book. It's from out of New York, looks like 1968. This one's this edition is 1970, 1970. And that was a good read, talking obviously about the origins of American politics. Here's a good biography by Edmund Morgan, another one of the godfathers of American history when we talk about, authors and teachers. This is The Puritan Dilemma, the story of John Winthrop. And this particular edition is the Library of American Biography, edited by Mark C. Carnes. This is a third edition, but I really liked this book. I thought it was very interesting. It was the first biography that I've ever read on John Winthrop, who, very interesting character. It's out of New York from the Pearson Press, and it is a 2007 book. And the part of this I even use like the chapter 5 called Survival, talking about the group that came over to start Massachusetts Bay. I use that in my 8th grade American history, and they seem to like that. They think that's pretty interesting. Here's another one of those landmark books, The Story of the 13 Colonies by Clifford Lindsay Alderman. And this was a nice little synopsis. It went colony by colony. It's from, 1966, and it's a Random House out of New York. Here's some George Washington stuff, these next three. So this is George Washington's Secret Six, The Spy Ring That Saved the American Revolution by Brian Kilmeade and Don Yeager. And I liked this one. I thought this was pretty good. I was also watching the show Turn on the television, and so it was a nice little companion to that TV show. This is from Sentinel Books, and it is 2016 is when this particular one was printed. And like I said, I liked that. Here is Washington's Revolution, the Making of America's First Leader. And it's by Robert Middlecoff. Robert Middlecoff is the one that wrote The Glorious Cause that I've talked about in previous videos. Oh, I gotta show you the rest of it, sorry. And that's a very, very good book, and I really enjoyed this one. It is Vintage Books out of New York, and it was printed in 2016. That was a good good synopsis on Washington. And here's the third one on Washington. This one is An Imperfect God, George Washington, His Slaves, and the Creation of America by Henry Winchick, or Weinchick, I'm not sure how to say that. But that was a very good book also. And it's really centered around Washington as a slaveholder and how he was able to talk about, like in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, how he's able to back up that document but yet be a slaveholder at the same time. And it talked about his ideas on the laws that were sometimes attempted to be passed in Virginia on getting rid of slavery. Of course, that obviously did not work at the beginning. And then also the arguments in the Constitution when they were trying to do it there, and then at the point of his death when he started to free some of his slaves, started to emancipate some of them. This is from Farrar, Straus, and Giroux out of New York, and it is 2003. So I thought that was a very interesting read. The next book in the stack is The American Revolution by Edward Countryman. This was a good book on the Revolution. It comes from the perspective of the little man, and so when he wrote this, it's not necessarily a battle-by-battle account. I mean, he talks a little bit about it, but there's not a lot of detail. He does a lot of the perspectives of people who usually don't get included per se in histories of the American Revolution, such as African Americans or Native Americans or women, or a lot of those that usually get skipped over. And so this was a really, I thought, a good book. It's from Hill and Wang, a division of Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, out of New York, and it is a 2003 edition. So that was a good book. I'd recommend that. Next book on the stack is The Quartet, Orchestrating the Second American Revolution, 1783 to 1789. And this was by Joseph Ellis. And of course, it centers around, in your four pictures there, George Washington, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. And really just all of the stuff that they went through in order to get the Constitution passed. And of course, I'm a big fan of Joseph Ellis. All of his books are about that big for the most part. Very readable. It's from Vintage Books out of New York, and it's a 2016 copy. So that was a good read. Another book on pretty much the same topic. This one's from Bruce Chadwick, though. This is Triumvirate, the story of the unlikely alliance that saved the Constitution and united the nation. And again, just kind of goes through all of the stuff that these gentlemen had to do to get the Constitution passed in order to make sure that the country stayed whole, or became whole, really, because at that point it was still kind of shaky. This comes from Source Books Incorporated out of Naperville, Illinois, and it's a 2009 book. Now, next one is a Michael Burlingame's book, The Inner World of Abraham Lincoln, and so this gets into a lot of the stuff going on inside Lincoln's head. It deals with a lot of psychological stuff. This book is a University of Illinois Press out of Urbana in Chicago, and it's a 1994 book. And I know this is a Very popular book with a lot of Lincoln historians. He did a very, very good job with this. He's got another book out that I would really like to get that I haven't been able to get yet. It comes in 2 volumes. But this next one's another Lincoln book, Honor's Voice, The Transformation of Abraham Lincoln from Douglas L. Wilson. And another very, very good book. I enjoyed reading this. It is a Alfred A. Knopf book out of New York, 1998. So good book there. And then the next one is 1864, Lincoln at the Gates of History. And this is a Simon & Schuster book. It was written by Charles Breslin Flood. I've read another book or 2 by him that I thought was pretty good. Story flows pretty easy. So it's Simon & Schuster out of New York, and it's a 2009 book. All right. Next book out of the box here is Vicksburg, 1863. This book was written by Winston Groom. Winston Groom, very good author. He's written several books. If you're familiar with Forrest Gump, he was the writer of Forrest Gump. But he writes a very, very good story. This comes from the Vintage Civil War Library, Vintage Books out of New York, and it was a 2009 book. And it's got a list of some of his other ones in here. I've got A Storm in Flanders, but I've yet to be able to read that. I haven't got to that yet. But I believe he wrote another one on the Battle of Shiloh that I would really like to look into. I think it was him that wrote it. Next book in the box here is The Last Stand, Custer, Sitting Bull in the Battle of Little Bighorn by Nathaniel Philbrick. And if you're a follower of the channel, you know I really like Nathaniel Philbrick. Great storyteller. I read this, it was a couple years ago, and I read a whole bunch of books. Well, I say a whole bunch. I read about 3 of them all at once on Custer and Little Bighorn, and I thought that was very interesting. I'd never read anything about it before, and all of the books that I read at that time were very detailed, and I learned a lot. This comes from Penguin Books, and it is a 2010 book. Very good read. All of Nathaniel Philbrick's books are good. All right, let's get some Stephen Ambrose. And I could not remember if I had shared these with you or not, so if I had in a previous bookshelf tour, please forgive me. But Stephen Ambrose's Undaunted Courage, Meriwether Lewis, Thomas Jefferson, and the Opening of the American West. And this was a great book. I found that to be fascinating. That was my first book I'd read on the Lewis and Clark, like full-length book on nothing but Lewis and Clark. This is a Touchstone book published by Simon & Schuster, and it is from 1996. But Ambrose and his family, they'd go on vacation out west, and they would go camp out at the Continental Divide where they crossed over, and they would camp there every summer. And he tells a good story about what led him to want to write that book. Next one, again, another Stephen Ambrose book. This is Nothing Like It in the World, The Men Who Built the Transcontinental Railroad, 1863 to 1869. Another good book by Ambrose. This is the first one I've ever read on the Transcontinental Railroad. Very detailed. Learned quite a bit while reading it. It's a Simon & Schuster out of New York, and this one is a 2005. Looks like 2005 book. Very good. Would recommend any of these. The next one is Band of Brothers, and HBO made a wonderful, was it a 10-part series, 12-part series? I can't remember, but it was either 10 or 12-part series on Band of Brothers, E Company, the 506th Regiment, 101st Airborne, from Normandy to Hitler's Eagle's Nest. And it was a very, very good series. I thoroughly enjoyed watching that. Matter of fact, I liked it so much I bought it. Ambrose has done tons of research on D-Day and other World War II topics. This is from 2004, this particular edition. And the last 3 books in the stack, these are all 3 baseball. Oh no, excuse me, 2 baseball and a football. Let's do the football first. This one's Growing Up Colt, A Father, a Son, A Life in Football by Colt McCoy and Brad McCoy with Mike Yorkie. This was one of those dollar books out from the Dollar Tree. I liked that. Thought that was interesting. Telling his story about growing up in football and just what he had to go through to get going. This is from Barber Publishing, and it is a 2011 book. That was a very fast read. And both of these next 2 are also from the Dollar Tree. So this is The Yankee Way, Playing, Coaching, and My Life in Baseball from Willie Randolph. And of course, Willie Randolph, wonderful, I believe he was a second baseman for the New York Yankees. Kind of one of the more quiet guys on the team, because at the time he started, there were some big names who had some big egos. And anyway, he tells a really good story. This is from William Morrow Publishers, and 2014 is the date. And then the last one in the box here is A Moment in Time, An American Story of Baseball, Heartbreak, and Grace by Ralph Branca and with David Ritz. And this is the Brooklyn Dodger great who gave up Bobby Thompson's shot heard around the world. Of course, that's the ever-famous home run that was hit. But wonderful story. Tells the insider point of view on how that home run was hit. I did not know before reading this book the story behind the story. You always hear about the shot heard around the world with baseball, but you never really hear about how that happened. This is from Scribner out of New York, and it is a 2011 book. 2011. So that was a wonderful, wonderful book. I also had, I guess I had these 3 in here also real fast. These were the Duck Commander books. So I had, this was a funny one, Psychology 101 by Cy Robertson. And I had the Duck Commander Family. And this one, How Faith, Family, and Ducks Built a Dynasty. And this is from Willie and Corey Robertson. And then I had Happy, 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 My Life and Legacy as the Duck Commander by Phil Robertson. Those were all really good books. They were from Simon & Schuster, and they were all recent books. Like this is a 2013, and the other ones were all around the same time period. But good books. So anyway, that is my unboxed shelf tour. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you stuck with me. And until next time, BookTube, have a great day.